Today is Friday, the 27th day of the Omer, which is 3 weeks and 6 days. We're in the fourth week, still in the week of Netzach, the week of endurance, of eternity. And today we focus on the aspect of Yesod, shebanetzach. Yesod, which means foundation, has to do with bonding. And today the aspect is bonding within endurance, you could call it. And in order for endurance to last, you have to bond and you have to connect. And that connection is so important as we think of different aspects of spirituality as we approach the day of receiving of the Torah. So Netzach, which has to do with eternity, which has to do with endurance, and also the Natseach, which means to succeed, has to have an aspect of bonding within it, which is the aspect of today. So the idea is you bond with whatever needs to endure, because if there is no bonding, if there is no connection, if it's done in a way that is aloof and not connected, it will not endure, it will not last. And that's the aspect of today. Just a word also about the parasha that we're going to read tomorrow. We spoke already earlier this week about the idea of educating our children, and we said that you have to educate them and teach them by example, like the pasuk says, "Emer el hakohanim ve'amarta alehem." Rashi explains, "Lazhir hagdolim al haktanim," to tell the parents to make sure that Lazhir has to do in Hebrew with Zohar, which means to shine. That as the parents shine through their actions, the children will absorb the way that the parents act. A similar idea we find at the end of the parasha, except on the other side of the spectrum. The end of the parasha speaks about a person who was a blasphemer, a person who blasphemed the name of Hashem, and his mother was Shlomit bat Divri. The Torah tells us what was her mother's name. His father was actually an Egyptian. He was the only case throughout all the 210 years of them being in Egypt. There was only one case of a Jewish woman that had a child from an Egyptian, and that even was because the Egyptian tricked her. It's a long story how he tricked her. She thought actually that it was her husband who was with her, but he tricked her, and she had a child from him, and that's the person who was the blasphemer. His mother's name was Shlomit bat Divri. Now, Shlomit bat Divri, the name in Hebrew, Shlomit has to do with Shalom, which means saying hello to every person, but Divri has to do with speaking. Ledaber is to speak. So we have here a woman who was quite loose with her lips. She was a person that communicated in a way that was very, very loose with people. And then, with that kind of behavior of a mother, it's maybe one of the reasons why the child was a person who used his lips to speak wrongly, to be a blasphemer. And that's another example how our children learn from our behavior. What we consider to be important is what they will consider to be important. What we speak in terms of at the dinner table, in terms of our subject of speech, if we're careful not to speak Lashon Hara about people, then they will not speak Lashon Hara about people. If we will complain, they will turn into complainers. It's been told before that when about 100 years ago, so there were many Jewish people that came from Europe to the United States, and they were very strict about keeping Shabbat, even at the risk of losing their job if they were not coming to work on Shabbat. But some families had children who grew up to be people who observe mitzvot and people who keep Shabbat, and other families had children, even though they kept Shabbat at home, that grew not to be Shabbat observant. And the reason that was given, I think it was by Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, is that those whose children went off the path is because on Shabbat, even though the father didn't go to work, he spoke how difficult it is to be a Jew, how much suffering there is because they're not able to go to work on Saturday, and therefore he was going to lose his job and he's going to have to look for another job. And those, their children, grew up to be non-observants. Those who sat at home and they were very joyful about the observance of Shabbat, and they say how lucky we are that we have Shabbat, that we will observe Shabbat no matter what, and there is simcha involved in it. then the children will grow up also to have simcha in observance of mitzvot. So the children really learn by example from their parents. And we have to be very careful how we act, not just for ourselves, but also in educating our children. If we are dedicating time to learning Torah, our children will also dedicate time to learning Torah. If we dedicate ourselves to mitzvot in a way that is very committed, then they will also be committed. And on the opposite, chas v'shalom, if we're not showing the type of commitment, then the children will also go in the way. So, the lesson from the parasha of this week, lead your children by example, shine so that they can shine also in their way. In their unique way, each child according to his way, but shine with the same values of commitment to Torah and mitzvot. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.